I was living a pretty normal, uneventful life when things took a bizarre turn. My name's Alex, and I'm a scholar, specifically an expert in ancient Earth mythology. I spent my days reading old dusty books, analyzing fertility rituals from lost civilizations, and tracing the origins of bizarre cultural customs. It was a life of intellectual fulfillment and solitude, no drama, no chaos, just me, my books, and the occasional takeaway pizza. Then came Zalara. I didn't expect a roommate, let alone one who wasn't even human. But as part of an intergalactic exchange program, she was assigned to live with me for 6 months. Zalara was a young alien sorceress from a planet light years away, and her species was interested in learning about human culture, particularly the intricacies of human relationships. At first glance, Zalara didn't seem too different. She had a humanoid form, though her shimmering silver skin and glowing eyes made it clear she wasn't from Earth. Her voice was melodic, like she was singing every word she spoke, and her movements were elegant, like she was gliding through the air. She was both beautiful and intimidating, but when she walked into my apartment wearing a flowing robe covered in sparkly symbols and carrying an incense holder, my first thought wasn't alien. It was, she's going to be a nightmare to live with. Her excitement was contagious, though, as she introduced herself with such vigor and enthusiasm, completely unaware of how awkward the situation was for me. I am Zalara. I have come to study Earth's ways, to understand human bonds, and to explore your ancient rituals, she announced in a dramatic flourish, nearly knocking over the couch. I just nodded, smiling nervously as she began explaining her purpose. Apparently, her species believed that human relationships were deeply connected to magic and energy flows, especially breeding, which, in her words, was a key to human vitality. I was instantly uncomfortable. I wasn't exactly the type of guy who was comfortable discussing breeding, even if it was for scholarly purposes. I prefer to keep things academic, keep it to the dry facts and rituals. Zalara, however, seemed to think that Earth's entire concept of relationships was one big magical ritual waiting to be explored. I quickly realized she had misunderstood everything about human intimacy, likely due to her species' lack of direct interaction with Earth. For her, breeding was a mystical, powerful act tied to the survival of the species, one that could be unlocked through a series of magical acts. And that's where the real chaos began. She wasted no time in diving headfirst into her research. Her first attempt at understanding human breeding rituals involved lighting a bunch of candles and chanting in a language I couldn't even begin to comprehend. The room smelled like an incense shop, and the temperature had risen to an uncomfortable level. This is the first step in the bonding ritual, Zalara declared with authority, placing an ornate crystal in the center of the living room. Now, we must focus on the energy flow. Stand with me, Alex. I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was clear I was going to be in for a weird ride. I awkwardly stood beside her, unsure whether I should participate in the ritual or just back out and go to my room. She handed me a small, glowing stone and instructed me to hold it close to my chest, which I did, though I couldn't see the connection between the glowing rock and human relationships. Zalara, however, was completely absorbed in the magic, speaking to me about Earth's fertility gods, the sacred act of union between humans, and how our energy would combine to unlock the mystical powers of bonding. The whole thing felt like an overly dramatic performance. I played along because, frankly, I had no idea how to get out of it without offending her. But it wasn't just the absurdity of the situation that made me uncomfortable. It was Zalara herself. She wasn't just an alien. She was an alien who was convinced that our culture was steeped in magical rituals. The way she spoke about human relationships, and particularly about breeding, was almost childlike in its innocence. She honestly believed that once we completed this ritual, we'd unlock some cosmic energy that would bind us together forever. I couldn't tell whether to laugh or cry. I wanted to stop her, to tell her that human relationships weren't some magical process, but I didn't know how. She was so earnest, so determined to learn about us in the only way she knew how, through her species' warped view of the world. So I just stood there, awkwardly participating, trying to hide my discomfort while secretly wondering if she'd eventually catch on that this whole thing was a massive misunderstanding. As she finished her chants, Zalara turned to me, her face glowing with excitement. Now, she said, her eyes wide with expectation. We must perform the ritual. Are you ready, Alex? I froze. Wait, what? Human bonding, she said seriously, requires physical connection. The ritual must be completed with a kiss, and then the energy will flow freely between us. My mind went into panic mode. A kiss? Was she serious? I'd seen the movies. I knew how these things worked. I wasn't prepared for this level of commitment or confusion. I tried to laugh it off, but Zalara wasn't having it. She stepped closer, a look of absolute confidence on her face. Her hands were warm, and she placed one on my cheek, tilted my face toward hers with surprising strength. It wasn't like anything I'd experienced before, certainly not in the classroom or at any academic conference. As she leaned in, her lips met mine softly, and the world seemed to stop. I didn't know whether to pull away or lean in, and the kiss was everything but romantic. It was awkward, clumsy, and completely devoid of passion. But Zalara seemed satisfied, her smile wide and bright as she pulled away. The energy is flowing, she said with a contented sigh. I can feel it. I stood there, dumbfounded, unsure of what had just happened. I tried to process the fact that an alien sorceress had just kissed me in a misguided attempt to bond, and I didn't know whether to be thankful or terrified. Zalara, oblivious to my inner turmoil, seemed pleased with herself and proud of the progress she'd made. But as the days went by, the rituals continued, and I quickly realized that Zalara wasn't going to stop. Every day, she would come up with new, even more bizarre ways to bond with me, convinced that her understanding of human relationships was the key to unlocking my inner energy. By now, I had resigned myself to the fact that this was my life. I was living with an alien who thought that intimacy was a magical, sacred event, and somehow I was her guide through the surreal experience. There was no escaping it, and honestly, at some point, I started to wonder, was this ritual going to lead to something more? Or would it just be a never-ending cycle of awkward rituals and confused explanations? Either way, I was stuck with her, my alien roommate, the sorceress who thought human breeding was magic. The next day, Zalara came up with another human bonding ritual, and I could already feel my stomach sink. I had just recovered from the awkward kiss the night before, and now I was bracing myself for whatever bizarre practice she had in mind this time. When she walked into the living room, holding an incense burner in one hand and a scroll of glowing runes in the other, I knew things were about to get a lot weirder. She didn't even give me time to react. Today, Alex, we will unlock the ultimate breeding magic by performing a ritual of the sacred touch. Her eyes gleamed with excitement, and she looked at me like I was about to take part in some ancient, mystical act that would bind our souls forever. I blinked. Sacred touch. I asked, try to keep my voice steady. Is that really necessary? Zalara nodded earnestly, as if I had just asked the dumbest question in the universe. Of course. You can't bond without the touch of true energy. Humans touch, and a flow of life transfers. She glanced down at the scroll, scanning the glowing symbols. And don't worry, Alex. It is part of the process. She said the last part with such sincerity that I almost believed she had some ancient understanding of human relationships. The scroll she was holding was covered in symbols I didn't recognize. Zalara placed it down on the floor in front of me, then gestured for me to sit. She walked around, muttering in what I assumed was her native tongue, the words sounding like a cross between a lullaby and a chant. The whole atmosphere was strangely serene, despite the overwhelming absurdity of the situation. Okay, here's the deal, I said, try to sound calm but failing miserably. I'm not doing anything weird. You're not, going to make me touch anything inappropriately, right? Zalara paused for a moment, her eyes scanning my face as if trying to decode a puzzle. Inappropriately, she repeated, confused. I don't understand. The sacred touch involves holding hands and feeling the energy flow between us. Isn't that the way of Earth? I felt my face flush. Well, sure, but we don't exactly do this kind of stuff like you think we do. It's not magic, okay? Her eyes widened. So you do not wish to bond? The disappointment in her voice was palpable. No. I quickly added, raising my hands in defense. I mean, I do. I just don't think it's supposed to be all magic and weird rituals, okay? Zalara smiled like she just solved a riddle. Then we will do it the right way, she said, pulling me down to sit on the floor across from her. She took my hands in hers, and for a brief moment, I almost forgot how utterly strange this was. The warmth of her skin was strangely comforting, and I found myself relaxing just a little, until she started chanting again, of course. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream as Zalara began humming in a soft, melodic voice, her hands still gripping mine. I tried to focus on the calmness of the moment, on the strange energy she kept talking about, but it was hard when her next move was to close her eyes, lean forward, and start pressing her forehead against mine. Now, the energy is activated, she said, her voice soft and filled with anticipation. We must feel it. I did not feel anything, at least not the way she thought I would. I was aware of the awkwardness, the weirdness of the situation, and the fact that my brain was scrambling to make sense of what was happening. Zalara seemed to be in some kind of trance, murmuring to herself, her face inches from mine, while I was still trying to figure out what human bonding actually meant in this context. The proximity made me nervous, but I wasn't going to pull away. Not yet. I didn't want to be rude. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that this was all far more intimate than anything I had planned for when I signed up for this whole roommate arrangement. Zalara's alien beauty was just a little too enchanting for comfort, and I didn't want to admit that, despite everything, I was starting to feel a strange attraction to her. Her skin shimmered under the dim lights, and she smelled like wildflowers, completely absurd but oddly soothing. Okay, I think I'm feeling something, I muttered, not entirely sure what I was talking about. Was this energy thing supposed to be literal? Because all I could feel was a kind of awkward heat creeping up my neck. Zalara opened her eyes, looking at me with such intensity that I thought she might read my thoughts. You feel it, yes? The energy is flowing. She grinned as if she had won some cosmic battle, and I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. It was so pure and untainted by any real understanding of how humans worked. It was honestly kind of endearing, though also kind of terrifying. She pulled away slightly, her hand still clasped around mine. Now, we move to the next part, she said, her eyes alight with excitement. The binding. I swallowed hard. The binding, I echoed, hoping that whatever she meant by that didn't involve some alien ritual I wasn't prepared for. Yes, Zalara said, her voice serious now. The binding is crucial. It is the final step. We must complete it before the energy can be fully exchanged. I had no idea what she was talking about. The more she said, the less I understood. Was she trying to hypnotize me into some weird alien mating ritual? Or was she just that convinced that this was how humans really did things? Before I could protest, she placed her forehead against mine once again, this time holding me in a firm, yet gentle grip. The world spun for a moment, and I had to remind myself that this was all just a misunderstanding. I wasn't actually involved in some ancient ritual with an alien who thought holding hands and forehead kisses would somehow make us bond. But as I stared into her glowing eyes, I found myself wondering if maybe there was something more to this whole mess than I thought. Maybe the energy wasn't just some mystical nonsense after all. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to human relationships than I'd realized. Zalara pulled back and smiled. Now you are part of the magic, Alex, she whispered. We are connected. The days following the Sacred Touch ritual were a blur. Zalara was on a high, convinced she had unlocked the ultimate human connection magic, while I was left to sort through the chaos of her bizarre understanding of human relationships. Every time I thought things might settle, she'd come up with new ritual that pushed me further into uncomfortable territory. It was both exhausting and hilariously absurd. One afternoon, I walked into the living room, hoping for a quiet evening, only to find Zalara standing in front of an altar she'd set up on the coffee table. Candles flickered, a strange incense burned, and she was dressed in a long, flowing robe, holding a large, enchanted crystal. This time, she was serious. I could see it in her eyes. She had reached the next step in her breeding magic journey. This is it, Alex, she said, her voice low and filled with anticipation. The final bonding ritual. This is where we transcend into a new plane of connection. I've spent days researching, and I prepared the sacred grounds. She gestured dramatically to the cluttered table, where bits of human and alien artifacts were scattered around like they'd come from a mystical garage sale. I stared at the mess. Wait, what? Final bonding ritual? Zalara, we've already done stuff. You don't need to keep trying these, whatever they are. But Zalara wasn't hearing it. No, Alex, you don't understand. The energy we shared in the sacred touch was just the beginning. Now we must complete the final act, the culmination of the ritual. She held the crystal high above her head, her eyes blazing with excitement. I sighed. I had been roped into this ridiculousness for days now, and no matter how many times I tried to explain the concept of human relationships, at least the way we understood them, Zalara was convinced this was all some kind of divine calling for both of us. I didn't know whether to laugh or pull my hair out at this point, but I could tell that stopping her now would result in an even more uncomfortable situation. The least I could do was humor her for a few minutes. Fine. What's this final act? I asked, trying to sound more agreeable than I felt. But there was no way I was going to get out of this unscathed. Not when she was this determined. The ritual requires us to bond on an energetic level, Zalara said, practically vibrating with excitement. We need to connect at the deepest level possible to release the energy trapped within us. I've read that humans... Okay, wait. I interrupted, holding up my hands. Are you telling me that you're asking me to bond with you on a deeper level? What exactly do you mean by deeper? This isn't some kind of alien mating ritual thing, right? Zalara didn't blink. Of course not. I'm simply saying that we must join our energies. To do so, we must reach a state of pure unity. With love, she added, as though she were delivering a final, profound revelation. I nearly choked on my own spit. Love. I sputtered. Zalara, this is way more complicated than I signed up for. She didn't seem to understand my discomfort. Instead, she clapped her hands together with glee. Exactly. We will complete the final stage of the ritual through a human tradition I discovered during my studies. It's called a cuddle. She said the word with such confidence that I didn't have the heart to tell her that the cuddle wasn't exactly what she thought it was. What exactly is a cuddle? I asked, my stomach twisting with dread. Zalara grinned, practically glowing. It's a sacred act of human closeness, a shared moment of pure connection. I found it in one of your romantic films, she explained, with a weird seriousness. In the movie, the characters get close to each other and hold each other while sharing their energy. I believe this is exactly what we need. My face went pale. Wait, you watch one of those romantic comedies? Zalara nodded enthusiastically. Yes, it was very educational. The characters had strong feelings for each other, and their energy was in perfect harmony when they cuddled. It was truly magnificent. I rubbed my temples. There was no way out. There was no way I could reason with her. Zalara, I began, my voice cracking slightly. We're not in love. You don't need to do these weird rituals. There's no cosmic energy here. Humans don't work like that. But Zalara wasn't listening. Instead, she moved toward me, her hands outstretched as if she were about to grab me and drag me into the most awkward situation of my life. Come, Alex. It will only take a few minutes. We will complete the bond. You'll feel the energy, she urged, her eyes wide with innocent certainty. I tried to back away, but she had already grabbed me by the arms and was leading me to the couch. Before I knew it, we were both sitting down, and she'd wrapped her arms around me as if this was the most natural thing in the world. It was warm, cozy even, but my mind was racing. This is weird. I muttered under my breath. This is so weird. Zalara, of course, didn't hear me. Instead, she leaned back, resting her head on my chest as though we were the best of friends. We are connected now, Alex. Our energies are intertwined. Can you feel it? I couldn't exactly say I felt anything other than a strong sense of discomfort. I had tried to set boundaries before, but it was clear that Zalara wasn't just a little clueless. She was fully invested in the idea that this was the natural progression of human bonding. I didn't know whether to laugh at the absurdity of it all or cry. because I was trapped in this alien's misinterpretation of love and affection. As if to confirm my worst fears, Zalara sighed contentedly, her grip tightening around me. "I feel it," she said softly. "Our energies are now aligned." I opened my mouth to argue, to protest again, but something about the situation struck me as so absurdly innocent, so far removed from the reality of human relationships, that I found myself at a loss for words. Was I uncomfortable? Absolutely. Was I stuck in this awkward mess? Definitely. But somehow, despite the weirdness, there was a strange kind of warmth that spread through me. I couldn't help but feel connected to her in a way that was completely out of my control. "I guess we're bonding now," I muttered, half to myself. But at that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just going along with this anymore. I had become a part of her world, whether I liked it or not. Zalara smiled up at me, clearly pleased. "Yes, Alex, we have bonded. Our energies are one." And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't sure whether to laugh, scream, or just accept my fate. The following day, Zalara was in full celebratory mode. She walked around the apartment, humming to herself, clearly satisfied with our bonding and the progress she believed we had made. As for me, I was still trying to process the bizarre turn my life had taken. The last few days have been an unrelenting wave of alien rituals, awkward touches, and confusing misunderstandings. I didn't know whether to laugh or pull my hair out, but one thing was certain. Zalara was more convinced than ever that our connection was special, and I was trapped in her version of human culture. I decided to take a break from the madness and try to regain some semblance of normality. But Zalara wasn't having any of it. She had already begun preparing for what she called the final stage. As if our bizarre cuddling session wasn't enough, now she believed we needed a symbolic union to truly cement our bond. I had no idea what that meant, but I had learned by now that Zalara's definition of normal was very different from mine. When I entered the living room, she was once again standing by the altar she had set up earlier. This time, however, she was holding a large ceremonial knife. The moment I saw it, a wave of panic washed over me. "Wait, hold on. What is that for?" I asked, my voice shaky. Zalara looked at me with complete seriousness. "It's for the final union, Alex. To solidify our bond. A small offering of your energy will be required to complete the ritual." I stared at the knife, then at her. "Wait a second, an offering? What exactly do you mean by that?" I asked, taking a cautious step back. Zalara was completely oblivious to the alarm bells going off in my head. "The ritual demands a small cut, just a drop of blood, to show your commitment to the bond. I've read that as a common practice among Earth cultures. The blood symbolizes a union of body and spirit." She spoke with such conviction that I almost thought she was serious. "No, absolutely not. I don't care what you've read. That's not how anything works on Earth," I said, raising my hands in protest. "You're not cutting me. That's insane." Zalara, however, remained unfazed. "But Alex, you don't understand. It is the final act. The universe demands it." She took a step toward me, the knife gleaming in the dim light. "This will make our connection permanent. I will forever be part of you, and you will be part of me." I took another step back, now seriously considering my options. Should I run? Should I hide in the bathroom? The entire situation had gone from confusing to downright terrifying, and I was struggling to keep my cool. But then, something in her eyes caught my attention. There was no malice, no intention to harm me. She genuinely thought this was the next step. I had to find a way out, without causing a full-on breakdown. "Zalara, listen to me," I said, trying to calm my voice down. "We don't need any more rituals. You've already done enough. The energy thing, the cuddling, the bonding, I get it. I get it now." I gave her a pleading look. "But cutting me? That's where I draw the line. You've got to stop." Zalara blinked, her confusion slowly turning into realization. She looked at the knife in her hand, then back at me. You do not want to be bound to me forever?" Her voice was quieter now, more vulnerable, and it struck a chord deep inside me. There was no denying how badly she wanted this, how deeply she believed that this was the only way for us to be connected. I sighed heavily. This was getting exhausting, but I had to make her see reason. Zalara, I'm not sure what's going on in your head, but what you're talking about, this idea of union, it's not what humans do. We don't need magical rituals to form connections. I tried my best to sound reasonable, though I wasn't entirely sure she could grasp the idea. Zalara's face fell. But I thought we were connected. I thought we were bonded. You said it yourself, our energies are aligned. I scratched my head, trying to piece together what I was feeling. Honestly, I wasn't sure whether to be frustrated or moved by her sincerity. Look, you've been really persistent with all this magic stuff, but the truth is, real connection doesn't come from rituals. It comes from understanding, from being there for each other, from talking things out. I paused, unsure how to continue. That's how humans form bonds, not through blood or magic. Zalara stared at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she put the knife down and stepped back. I understand now. You don't want to be bound by magic. You want something real, something human. Yes, exactly, I said, feeling a sense of relief. That's what I've been trying to explain. Zalara looked down at her hands, then back at me. So what happens now? If the bond is not completed with ritual, what will I do? I took a deep breath and walked over to her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Zalara, I think you've already bonded with me in your own way. But real connection doesn't come from rituals or magic. It comes from understanding each other, and that's what we need to do. I looked her in the eyes and smiled. We don't need any more rituals. We need time, and we need to talk. She nodded slowly, her face softening. I think I can understand that. Maybe it's time to stop with the rituals and just be with each other like humans do. I smiled, grateful for her willingness to listen. Exactly. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like we were finally on the same page. Zalara had been so determined to bond to her own interpretation of magic that she had missed the simple truth. Human relationships were about connection, not ritual. Now, we could move forward as roommates, as something more, whatever those would be, without the need for any more weird, awkward, and downright ridiculous ceremonies. Thank you, Alex, Zalara said softly, her smile genuine, for showing me what it means to be human. I chuckled, and thank you, Zalara, for not cutting me with that knife. And just like that, the absurdity of the past few days faded into something resembling normalcy. I wasn't sure what the future held for us, but for once, I was glad to be sharing a space with someone who, despite her odd methods, genuinely wanted to understand what it meant to be human.